Okay, hello and good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Thank you for joining us for our Square Root Day webinar on promoting growth mindset strategies with the Quantile Framework for mathematics. My name is Dave Lines, and I am Director of Product Management here at Metametrics, and I will be your host for today's webinar. We have some great speakers who are joining us today, including Jill Stringer, who is a math STEM consultant at the Wyoming Department of Education, and Gary Williamson, who is a senior research scientist here at Metametrics. Before we get started, let me just go over some logistics information with you. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please refer to your confirmation email or call 919-886-0019. And we will do our best to help you out. If you have any questions for us today, please submit your questions to all panelists, which you can get to through the Q&A menu. If you can't get to that, you can always submit them through chat as well. And when submitting your question, please include your full name and organization. And just a note, we will be sending out a follow-up email containing the full presentation and supporting materials after the webinar, and that will go to all participants. Okay, so as I mentioned before, today is Square Root Day, and as I'm sure all of you already know, this is the 4th Square Root Day so far this century. Now, as some of you probably also know, Metametrics usually hosts a Pi Day webinar to celebrate Pi Day and eat pie and tell silly pie jokes. But since today is one of only 10 Square Root Days this century, and since there won't be another Square Root Day for 9 long years, we couldn't let it slip by uncelebrated. And here is your obligatory Square Root Day cartoon, which explains the real reason we didn't do Pi Day this year. We'll get back to you about Fibonacci Day later in the year. Okay, let's take a look at the agenda for our webinar today. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about what we mean when we talk about a growth mindset. And then we're going to look at using quantile measures as micro goals. We're going to go over some tools that are based on quantile measures. We're going to look at some research for growth towards college and career readiness. And then we're going to do a quantile growth planner demonstration. Okay, our first speaker today will be Jill Stringer. Jill is joining us from Cheyenne, Wyoming, where she is currently a math STEM consultant with the Wyoming Department of Education. And Jill has advanced degrees in education and mathematics, and more importantly, Jill worked as a high school math teacher for 22 years. Wow. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you, Dave. That was a big wow. That's a long time. So first of all, I want to thank Metametrics for allowing me to speak with all of you today. As Dave mentioned, I was a math teacher for 22 years, and I spent many years trying to fit a curriculum into this coveted pacing guide shared by my math department. And so trying to get a curriculum covered by the end of a semester, and what happened in that scenario is having students fall behind, being expected to kind of catch up on their own, come into class when they can, or to get help when they can, but not really given support to meet their individualized needs. So I think my frustration, as with many teachers, came when our standardized test scores didn't reach the threshold that was set either by our school or our state, because I felt that, and I knew that I was raising grade levels in my classroom, but it wasn't always showing proficiency on the standardized test. So I believe now that was because I was trying to customize my learning in my classroom, but I was trying to teach to a whole class, a singular common curriculum, and just material from a pacing guide. So it seemed, and it felt like that if students aren't meeting their proficiency, then there's this big undercurrent that it's always the teacher's fault. So I would go home and have to have this self-esteem talk with myself to not become too discouraged. And I think that's common with teachers. And so now teachers, though, have this valuable data that is available immediately that will allow them to monitor students with a growth-minded target, to learn at their own rate, and have more success with acceleration. So what I want to focus on today is growth mindsets in students in a classroom where individualized learning is respected using a Quantile Framework. And as a math consultant, I'm excited to work with these quantiles that Metametrics is publishing to help take individual students' performance levels and project their potential performance. So making that shift is what I would call a school-centric classroom shifting to a learner-centric classroom, which allow us the opportunity to integrate the Quantile Framework and instill a growth mindset for our students. So it will make the what was impossible possible for students, or for teachers, and help our students persevere in showing monitored growth. So growth mindset. A growth mindset, a mindset according to Carol Dweck, a professor at Stanford, is a self-perception or self-theory that people hold about themselves. So that you might believe that you're intelligent or you're unintelligent, that would be an example of a mindset. So my thinking that I was a bad teacher because my students were struggling on a standardized test, that would be a negative mindset. When I go bowling and I, bowl 3 gutters in a row, I have a pretty negative mindset and a fixed mindset that, I can't bowl. But I know that I can improve if I take the time to work at it. So these mindsets can have a profound effect on learning achievement, skill acquisition, even personal relationships, professional success, and many other dimensions of life. So consider the distinction between a fixed and a growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, people believe their basic qualities like intelligence and talent are fixed traits that they're born with. Students who have adopted a fixed mindset, believe they're smart or they're not smart, and there's no way to change it. So, for example, you may have a learner at a slower rate, and they may shy away from challenges because they've had a bad performance and think that they can't learn. And when students with a fixed mindset fail at something, which they inevitably will because we all do, they tend to tell themselves they can't or won't be able to do it. So when they fail a math test, they say, I can't do math. Now, how many times have we heard that? Or they make excuses to rationalize that failure. So whereas in a growth mindset, students believe that their abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Students who embrace the growth mindset believe they can learn more or become smarter if they work hard and persevere. They may learn it more quickly, and view challenges and failures as opportunities to improve their learning and skills. So when I think of a growth mindset, I hope to be preparing students for a college and career readiness future that embraces a love of learning, the opportunities to make mistakes, building persistence, and finding a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. And this is where I believe we want all of our students to be. So to be realistic, we're a mixture of both mindsets. It's difficult to not have a fixed mindset sometimes, but we need to push ourselves and nurture growth mindsets in our students and try to move beyond just pushing them toward effort. Help students identify new strategies and approaches so their effort can be a productive effort. And we don't want to always praise intelligence or abilities, but definitely praise the process and the effort. We tell students they're smart all the time, and their parents constantly say you're so smart, but when they fail, they really don't know how to handle that failure. So instead, we want to praise the effort and the process. So the question is, how do we get students to value struggle, failure, and perseverance in the classroom? Well, it starts in our schools. We need to begin shifting from a school to learner-centric classroom where the needs of each individual learner is met. So reimagine a school where authentic learning of each child is respected. versus trying to keep a whole class on track together by following a curriculum pacing guide. You know, we need to begin these discussions in our PLCs, our principal, staff, and department meetings. A learner-centered classroom is a fluid system that allows progression for all students and is organized to support the rate of the individual learner's progression. So our focus should be more on each individual student. So for example, we may have a third grade student who's learning math at a fourth grade level or a second grade level. So we want to take that student and group and loop them into the level they're learning and allow them to accelerate at their own pace and then regroup through their progression. That is more of a learner-centered classroom. You know, teach them to have a growth mindset by acknowledging their learning rates and strategies are different for each child. We should expect our students to always try to improve with a productive effort and with hard work and a belief in themselves and their individual process. And we can do that in the classroom through an individualized learning process for each student, with teachers working in small groups, monitoring students with growth targets using quantiles, and encompassing the values of a growth mindset. So teachers in a learner-centered classroom are committed to personalized learning. They teach using their strengths. So you might have teachers, you know, we're always trying to hire math coaches and instructional facilitators to help our teachers because they struggle, because math can be difficult if you don't have a math background. And so, you know, we can have teachers teaching only math or teaching only science or only social studies or only English and teach to their strengths, which then allows them not to be teaching 4 to 6 disciplines each day. The teachers shift from givers of information to facilitating student learning. Their focus becomes on the student learning, where research shows a higher rate of student retention. A teacher supports students in building a strong knowledge foundation and building positive teacher-student relationships. And teachers are grounded in reflection and revision, giving constructive feedback where the use of assessment is part of the learning process. And lastly, they model grit through toughness and determination in their classrooms. So what's happening in our school-centric schools? Well, students are entering, a lot of our high school students are entering college at remedial levels. Every year in the United States, nearly 60% of incoming students need remedial work in English or mathematics. There's a teacher crisis overload. I don't know if you've ever felt like this young lady on the right, but I know that I did at times teaching. The number one reason teachers are leaving the profession is planning time, and they have an impossible job to do and are burning out. And we lose 40% of our teachers in the first 4 years nationwide. According to an EPE Research Center report, test scores and other quantitative measures have shown that teaching has the largest in-school impact on student learning. So we're setting our teachers up for failure in school-centered classrooms. We have to be able to teach to the needs of our students, not just teaching to a curriculum. So why would we not want to create an environment that is good for both the student and the teacher? Well, Quantile is a framework of data where we can finally push rethinking of school-centric school practices. Quantile data is now available, and we're able to take individual student performance levels and, again, project their potential performance levels with the Quantile Metametrics is publishing. So we now have data points that 10 years ago were unavailable. And these data points measure where students are and where they need to go to show growth. So we want to set micro goals for our students, and through the Metametrics Quantile Framework, those goals begin with having consistent and incremental progress where students embrace a growth mindset of, you know, I can continually improve, I can always get better, and persevere through making mistakes, because when you make mistakes, that sparks your brain and helps it grow, and that's proven research. Another micro goal is that students are provided with particular skills they need to learn that will make them successful in an individualized plan. So, and now because of Quantile measures, we can teach the specific needs and skills of students and then validate that. So cognitively, each student has their own rate of learning, and we can honor that learning process. And lastly, we want to look for small wins repeated over time. So a growth mindset is not aligned to a simple proficiency in a standard, but it's learner-centric. And our challenge is to recognize when Metametrics put forth quantile measurements that we now have data to make changes in the classroom over time. So here's an example of what we mean by micro goals. Meet Samantha, who is a 5th grader in Wyoming. If we're able to teach to the specific needs of each student, we can target skills and concepts where Samantha could be having trouble or accelerate her learning where she's excelling. So currently, Samantha will have the opportunity as a 5th grader in Wyoming to learn to convert among different size standard measurement units within a given measurement system and uses these conversions to solve real-world problems. So learning this skill would be a micro goal of Samantha's. In the Quantile Framework, this skill is convert measures of length, area, capacity, weight, and time expressed in a given unit to other units in the same measurement system in number and word problems. But say maybe Samantha is struggling with this skill. So if you look onto quantiles.com, there are free tools and resources available for her teacher to use, and the teacher can look up the standard, find the associated skill with that standard, and then the necessary pre-skills, and then choose from a variety of free resources that are aligned with this pre-skill. So for instance, in order to convert measurements, Samantha will need the skills of the Quantile Framework, estimate and solve division problems with multi-digit divisors. So here you can see the instructional resources available that can help Samantha with this pre-skill of dividing with multi-digit divisors. Metametrics has created a guide for quantile tools and resources on quantiles.com for using that Quantile Framework to help meet the micro goals of students. So, and again, Dave had mentioned earlier that they'll be sending this information to you up in a follow-up email. So if you want to explore the website and find out how to access some of these free tools and resources. So setting macro goals now allows students to see where they come from and where they are presently, and then where they're going to go in the future. Using personalized data to help them reach their individual goals. So here's Samantha's macro goal. As mentioned, she dreams of becoming an electrician. Her dad is an electrician, and she thinks he's amazing and wants to be an electrician too. So according to a list of skills published by the Job Corps that outlines what skills are needed for careers pertaining to electrical fields, one math skill an electrician needs is converting within or between American wire gauge, metric, and customary systems when working with electrical wire. So what Samantha then successfully learns in 5th grade can be used as the basis for learning how to convert within and between metric and customary units, a skill which she's going to use as an electrician. So we can now promote personalized data and create the school and classroom shift that works for students and teachers. We can empower students to reach their goals through a desire to learn and monitor growth by individual student potential. Motivate students through a joy of learning and show that their goals are obtainable. And also plan for college and career readiness by beginning with an end in mind and allow students to see effort as a path to mastery. And in the previous example, if Samantha wants to become an electrician, she can determine what prereq skills she needs, what math skills she needs to learn, and determine if she's on track to use quantile measures. It's not, though, just about the math, but that Samantha is incorporating a growth mindset in a learner-centric classroom while concurrently meeting her individual needs and instilling perseverance in her to meet goals that are essentially important to her. Samantha has belief and value in herself to produce incredible accomplishments as an electrician in today's world, which are the tools that we hope all our students have to be successful in life. So thank you for taking time out of your day and letting me speak today. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and hand this back over to Dave.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. That was really very helpful information. Our next speaker today will be Gary Williamson. And Gary is joining us today from the International Objective Measurement Workshop in Washington, D.C., where he will be presenting his research on the advantages of taking a long-term view of academic growth. Gary has advanced degrees in statistics and educational research and is a senior research scientist here at Metametrics. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks very much, Dave. I want to share today some of our research on the difficulty of mathematics skills and concepts and how these results can lead to a better understanding of the mathematics ability that may be necessary for college and career readiness. We examined the mathematics textbooks used in the United States of America. In each text, we analyzed the skills and concepts associated with each lesson and assigned quantile measures to quantify the difficulty of the mathematical skills and concepts featured in each lesson. Let's start by showing a continuum of these mathematics lesson difficulty measures spanning grades K through 12. Let me first explain a little bit about this chart so that everybody understands what is being shown here. On the horizontal axis, we've designated grades K through 8 from left to right, and then certain courses. Algebra 1 and Integrated Math 1 correspond to grade 9. Geometry and Integrated Math 2 correspond to grade 10. Algebra 2 and Integrated Math 3 correspond to grade 11. Finally, we've placed pre-calculus and trigonometry at grade 12. And the vertical axis on the chart denotes the quantile measures. A figure called a box and whiskers plot is shown above each grade or course on the horizontal axis. A box and whiskers plot is a way of summarizing a distribution of scores. In this case, the scores are the lesson measures expressed in quantile scale units. Thus, each box and whiskers plot summarizes the distribution of lesson measures found in textbooks associated with that particular grade or course. In this display, each box has a horizontal line inside the box and two vertical lines extending from the box. The horizontal line within the box represents the median or midpoint of the distribution of lesson measures. That is, 50% of the lesson measures for that grade or course fall below the median and 50% lie above the median. The box itself represents the middle 50% of lesson measures or lesson difficulties for that grade or course. The lower whisker extends down to the 5th percentile of the distribution of lesson measures, and the upper whisker extends upward to the 95th percentile of the distribution. As you can see, there's considerable variation in lesson difficulty within each grade, and there's substantial overlap in the distributions of lesson difficulties from one grade to another. However, the most obvious feature is that the difficulty of mathematics concepts and skills increases as we go up in grade. In America, 19 states require that students complete Algebra 2 in order to obtain a high school diploma. Other states, such as North Carolina, require Algebra 1, and so we may think about the courses Algebra 1 through Algebra 2 as those courses that are more or less required for exiting high school. We included pre-calculus and trigonometry texts in the graph at grade 12 as a way of illustrating advanced mathematics content that forms the boundary between the end of high school and the beginning of post-secondary education. These courses represent the kinds of mathematics skills and concepts that we expect students might encounter either in 12th grade or in the first year of college or post-secondary education. It's important to understand that the Quantile Framework for Mathematics is designed to facilitate instruction. One way it does this is by providing a way to match a student's mathematics ability with the difficulty of the concepts and skills being taught. When a student's mathematics ability or quantile measure is equal to the quantile measure of a mathematics skill or concept, the Quantile Framework forecasts 50% understanding for the student. This means that the student is ready for instruction on that concept or skill. By implying readiness for instruction, this 50% matching convention is particularly relevant to understanding college readiness because college is an instructional experience. If students are to be college ready, they must be ready for instruction on concepts and skills contained in college mathematics. However, we'll need another perspective to address career readiness. So this next slide We're exploring the idea of college and career readiness and how to express that in the context of our continuum. It takes two perspectives. One perspective is that you have to be ready for instruction when you get to college. The other perspective is that you have to be ready to actually perform the mathematics associated with career entry. Fortunately, the Quantile Framework makes it possible to moderate the match between a person's math ability and a math skills difficulty. We know that 50% understanding is sufficient to be ready for instruction, but that's probably not sufficient for a career where the student will be expected to perform with a higher level of understanding. We've learned from our research that the subjective experience of students when they attain 75% understanding is that they are able to engage in skills and concepts with minimal instruction. They're able to solve complex problems related to the skills and concepts. They're able to connect those skills and concepts with skills and concepts in other strands, and they experience fluency and automaticity of skills. These characteristics, or these subjective experiences, are more in line with what we would expect students to manifest when they actually are in a career or on the job. So we think that 75% understanding reflects a suitable match between person ability and skill or concept difficulty for the career context. To summarize, we interpret 50% understanding as readiness for instruction and 75% understanding as readiness to perform. Let's go to slide 3 now, or the third slide in my section here. This next slide illustrates these two perspectives I just described. When students get to college, they're likely to be instructed on materials such as pre-calculus and trigonometry. Look at the box and whisker plot for pre-calculus and trigonometry. The box portion of that display represents the typical difficulty of lessons in pre-calculus and trigonometry textbooks. Students would need to have abilities in this same range in order to be ready for instruction in college. On the other hand, if a student is going to enter a career, they need to have a higher level of understanding of the skills and concepts of traditional and integrated math sequences, because those are typically the high school graduation requirements for a diploma, and the diploma is typically required for entrance into most careers. And so we've plotted here with little triangles connected by line segments the mathematics abilities that correspond to 75% understanding of the median lesson measures for traditional and integrated math texts. We regard 75% understanding as readiness to perform the mathematical skills typical of those courses required for a diploma. It's interesting that these two ranges, the range representing readiness and for instruction in pre-calculus and trigonometry versus the range representing readiness to perform mathematical skills required for a diploma, those two ranges are very nearly identical, and we see that in the next slide, which summarizes the quantile measures associated with these two perspectives. So as you look at this table, you'll notice the career perspective on the left-hand side and the college perspective on the right-hand side. On the left, we have the content areas for Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, or correspondingly Integrated Math 1, 2, and 3. And you can see the quantile measures that express the ability needed for 75% understanding of the median lesson measures, which represent the typical difficulty of lessons in each respective course. On the right-hand side, we've got the college perspective. It shows the 25th percentile, the median, and the 75th percentile of the pre-calculus and trigonometry lesson measures based on the Quantile Framework's default matching convention, which corresponds to 50% understanding or readiness for instruction. Note the close correspondence in the table between the quantile measures associated with the two perspectives, career readiness and college readiness. The quantile measures for the two perspectives are nearly identical. Thus, we feel that we can use the range from about 1220Q to 1440Q to satisfy both purposes. Let's look at the next slide, which repeats an earlier slide, and I want to kind of bring that home for you. The rationale for using a common range for both college and career readiness is supported by asking a question and considering the answer to this question. And the question is, if a student has mathematics ability in the range from 1220Q to 1440Q, what can she do? The answer, she would have about 50% understanding of the skills she's likely to encounter as she enters college. That is, to the extent that pre-calculus and trigonometry represent the kinds of skills and concepts encountered in post-secondary mathematics education. And as a result, the student is ready for instruction in those skills and concepts. Thus, she's ready for college. At the same time, she would have 75% understanding of typical skills and concepts associated with courses required for high school graduation or a high school diploma. So, she's also likely to be ready to perform in a career that requires a high school diploma. Let's think again about Samantha and her aspiration to be an electrician. We've analyzed the concepts and skills associated with the occupation of an electrician and have determined that 75% understanding of the typical skills and concepts required for being an electrician requires a math ability of approximately 1045 Q. That, of course, is lower than what we've shown in our chart. Samantha has to realize that even though the particular skills required in the job might be somewhat lower, the job will in all likelihood require a high school diploma, which means she'll need to attain the level of understanding that we've shown in the chart. This kind of perspective helps Samantha understand that she may need to aspire a little higher in order to be qualified for the career once she exits high school. Let's come to the last slide in my part now. This final slide summarizes our view. We've relabeled the pre-calc and trig as CCR, standing for College and Career Readiness. We think that we can reasonably promote the idea of a college and career readiness continuum for mathematics. That is, a pathway through mathematical concepts and skills as they increase from kindergarten up through the end of high school, where students reach the boundary of the college and career readiness frontier. To that end, we recommend 1220Q to 1440Q as a reasonable range of mathematics abilities to which students should aspire if they want to be ready for college and career. And that concludes my part of the presentation.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Gary, for sharing your research with us. We here at EdMedMetrics are very grateful for the work that Gary's been doing. And right now, I'm going to show you one of the ways that we are using Gary's work to help us develop some new tools for parents and educators. So the Quantile and Lexile growth planners are some new tools that we're working on based on Gary's research that the software team here at Metametrics has been putting together. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to use student quantile or Lexile measures to display projected growth in math or reading ability. So parents or educators can input quantile or Lexile measures from annual assessments, and then the growth planner will forecast future student growth based on the measures that have been entered. And then that future growth can be compared to college and career readiness goals, can be compared to peer performance, or specific career demands. Now, the version of the Quantile Growth Planner that I'm going to show you today is currently in development, and when these tools are completed, we will have free versions available on quantiles.com and lexile.com, and we will also have API versions available for licensing to our partners. So now we are going to take a look at the Quantile Growth Planner in action. Okay, so this is the main screen for the Quantile Growth Planner. And as you can see, it has a graph which tracks quantile measures along its y-axis and the student's grade along its x-axis across the bottom. And obviously right now the graph is empty because we haven't put in any data yet. So I'm going to go up here to the top and click on the Add Edit Quantile Measures button so we can put in some quantile measures. And for the purposes of this demo, I'll be referring back to Samantha, our 5th grade student from Wyoming, who is dreaming of someday following in her father's footsteps and becoming an electrician. So let's say Samantha takes the Proficiency Assessments for Wyoming Students, or PAWS test, at the end of 5th grade, and she does pretty well, and her quantile measure from that test is 800Q. So I'll put in 800Q here, and let's say she took the test in June of 2013. So I'm going to use the little date widget here, go back to June, and pick a day. And again, Samantha was in 5th grade when she took that test. So now let's say that Samantha also takes the PAWS test at the end of 6th and 7th grades. So I'm going to click on Add Measure, and I'm going to put in quantile measures for those tests. And let's say that for 6th grade, she went up to an 875Q. And we'll say this was the end of 2014, so I'll put in a date there. And I'll change the grade over here to 6. And now I'm going to add one more measure for 7th grade. We'll say she took that test at the end of 2015. So again, I'll put in a date from June of 2015 and change the grade to 7th grade. So I've put in her measures from the pause test, and I've entered date and grade information. And so now I'm going to click on the Graph Me button down here in the bottom right corner. Okay, so now you can see that we have lots of information on our graph, and I'm going to go over that information one thing at a time. So the first thing you can see here, see these blue dots right here? Well, this is where the growth planner is showing us the quantile measures from Samantha's pause test results. So you can see we have 5th grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade, 800, 875, and 950 were her measures. Okay, so the next thing you might notice is that there's this long black curve that runs all the way across the graph from 3rd grade on the left to 12th grade on the right. Now this black curve indicates the median lesson difficulty for each grade as described in Gary's research. Do you remember when he was showing us the box and whiskers plots? Well, the medians for each grade correspond to this curve. Now, the growth planner has also added a dotted blue curve right here to show us Samantha's forecasted growth path. And this growth path can be generated in a couple of different ways based on the measures entered, and I'll come back to that in just a second. Also, in addition to the student growth path, the growth planner has also added this green curve up here, which indicates the recommended growth path that Samantha needs to follow to be at the median level for college and career readiness by graduation. So basically what it's saying is that if Samantha wants to be at the median level, she needs to show a little bit more growth than the student growth path is projecting. So maybe there's some room for intervention there. And last but not least, the growth planner has highlighted in yellow, over here on the right, a range to indicate where Samantha needs to be college and career ready by graduation. So the growth planner has given us some very useful information here. You can see that Samantha is doing well compared to the median lesson difficulty for 5th, 6th, and 7th grade curriculum. And if she follows the recommended growth path, she will be, if she follows, the recommended growth path, she can be at the median level for college and career readiness by graduation. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the student growth path can be generated in a couple of different ways, and we've added text beneath the graph to explain how that works. But just to summarize, if the user enters fewer than 4 quantile or lexile measures, as we did, the growth planner selects a student growth path from a set of reference curves that represent the growth of students in the sample population. And in our example, the growth path selected is the curve that lies closest to the student measures we entered. Now, if the user enters 4 or more lexile or quantile measures, the growth planner will attempt to construct a unique growth path to show the student's projected future learning. Now, in some cases, even if the user enters 4 or more measures, it might still not be possible to construct a unique growth path, and in those cases, the growth planner falls back on a student growth path selected from the reference curves. Okay, and that concludes the demonstration of the Quantile Growth Planner. And as I mentioned earlier, the Growth Planner tools are currently still in development, but we will make sure to let you all know when they become available for public use. So now let's see if we had any questions from anybody. And see a question here. And the question is there a way to correlate MAP scores with quantile measures? We have quantile scores for our state-assessed students, grade 3 and up, but not for primary K1 or 2 students. So that's a great question. Yeah, and we will respond to this participant directly with an answer to that question. And I don't see any other questions here, which means we must have done a fantastic job of explaining everything and you all completely understand. But in case you don't, actually, we do have another question. And the question is, are there any limitations to how closely the 4 measures are collected, all 4 within 1 year versus multiple years? This is an excellent question. And at this point in time, or at least for the first version of the Growth Planner tools, we will be looking at year-end assessment. So we won't be looking at benchmark assessments from throughout the year. We'll be looking at the annual assessment at the end of the year. And I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, you can definitely contact us directly, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it. And I see we have some other questions that are coming in here. There's a question that is asking why our aspiring electrician with above midpoint scores still ended up with a trajectory below the midpoint is an excellent question. I asked that question myself when I first started using the Quantile Growth Planner. And the simple answer is that based on the student growth paths that have been collected from the data that Gary has been working with, these are the growth paths that we're seeing. So basically, the lesson difficulty for the earlier grades is a little bit below. And another thing to keep in mind is that the median lesson difficulty is looking at the lesson difficulty for the entire year, whereas we're looking at an end-of-grade test. So in most cases, you would expect the end-of-grade test to be above the median lesson difficulty for the year. And I'm just going to ask Gary if he wants to add anything to that. If he can certainly jump in.
That was a good explanation, David. Don't really have anything extra to add. It may be that in future versions of Growth Planner, we can get even more refined in how we produce these projections. But at the current time, it is as Dave described it.
Okay, and I see that we also had another question come in that was similar, so hopefully we've answered both of those questions there. Yes, thanks, that's great. So I think we're gonna wrap it up here. We did want to share with you some information for how you can follow us on social media. We are on Twitter and Facebook, and we have a YouTube channel. And you can also follow up with us directly through our websites and also by sending us email at lexile.com. And that is going to conclude our Square Root Day webinar on promoting growth mindset strategies with the Quantile Framework for Mathematics. We want to give big thanks to our speakers, Jill Stringer and Gary Williamson, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. As we mentioned earlier, we will be sending you all a follow-up email with links to this presentation and supporting materials. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about anything we discussed today, the Quantile Framework in general. And we will see you all on Fibonacci Day. Thank you.